hit record for the students at home. And we're going to officially open up the research paper starting today. I know that's like 5 days early, but everything's fallen into place for you to do your paper. Everything fell into place during the holiday. And so day 50 passed, 52, 53, and things just accelerated. And then you now have everything you need to write your paper. You don't need to wait any longer. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and hit some of those things really fast. And I'll show you, first of all, let's do your grades. Grades went up last night. Let me share the screen. Okay, so grades went up last night. Looks like we've got pretty much everybody done with the first one. Second one, 63 done. Something's odd there. My math must be off. 67 have done the next one. 60 have done 6 through 8. So that's pretty good. There's only about, just a few people, five, 6 people haven't done all the assignments leading up to this last one in the Senate trial with Lee and Romney. 44 as of last night. I would have hoped that would have been done. That was my plan. My plan was to give you guys plenty of time to get you to finish that one so you could work on your research project this week. Some people have got to do both. They got to finish this one and do their research project. But for 44 of you, you have an open week to work on your paper to get it in before the early turn-in date. And of course, you got a couple weeks for that. That's not till April, but you can really get it in by the end of this week. So there's no reason why not. So this is kind of the week to work on your paper. After that, we're going to have other assignments and so on, but I'm going to the website and I just restructured a little bit because now this is paper week. This is the week that you can start submitting your paper. So I've got a little article here that you can read that talks about the American Rescue Plan. So Biden's $1.9 trillion billion bill passed. The American Rescue Plan. It's one of the biggest pieces of, listen carefully, you listening? It's one of the biggest pieces of legislation the country has ever passed, ever. It ranks right up there among the great laws ever passed in American history in terms of what it can do and who it goes to. And we're going to show you some stuff on that. Biden gave an address to the nation on day 52. And oh, by the way, over the weekend, we passed 100 million people vaccinated. So, and then he buys another 100 million doses of Johnson & Johnson. So we've got plenty to last everybody through until we get our booster shots next fall. The paper guidance is still here. So you click on that and it tells you the due dates and so on. First day can be turned in is actually, we'll change that. We'll go day 55. Okay. So that's today, right? So what's the 15th today, I think? We'll just pretend it's the 15th. That's close enough. So that's the guidance right now. You can start now. There's no reason to wait. And the timing couldn't be better. So basically Biden accomplished in 50 days what most presidents can't do in 100. So this guy is already writing himself into the history books for achievement. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk more about that achievement. Okay, first of all, let's talk about the vaccine, 100 million doses into people's arms. So I'm going to go ahead and hit that link first. Let's start with that one. Okay, 100 million shots. And it's weird because as soon as we get close to getting this thing under control, some people decide, well, I don't have to wear masks anymore. I don't have to help out. Look, not every American is immune to this thing, right? Maybe a third of the Americans have actually had now some immunity to this. 2/3 don't have it. So we still need to wear our masks and help others out. But let's go ahead and play this little clip. Here we go. Let's see if I get my volume up, make sure you can hear. Okay, so here we go. Ready? Oops. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, no. Spring break, people,
Tonight, a rush
young people.
Return to normal life, fueling a massive vaccine rollout where not everyone is waiting. In Florida, spring break chaos. 2 officers injured as they tried to enforce rules and break up a crowd.
Just trying to have a good time. Spring break.
Others pushing back. This video in Texas showing police arrest a woman inside a bank after she refused policy to mask up.
Not wearing a mask.
Nationwide, the U.S. just hit 100 million shots in arms. The current rate, vaccinating 2.2 million Americans every day. President Biden promising to make every adult eligible by May.
Okay, now let's stop right there. before we hear the president talk about this. Essentially, he hit that goal, 100 million. And by streamlining the system, accelerating distribution, buying a lot more vaccine, like lots more, okay, and met that goal. Now what he's saying, he's up the goal. He's up the timetable. He wants everybody to have access to, so they can start signing up for a shot on May 1st. So hopefully we can get everybody vaccinated by the end of May that wants to be vaccinated. And let's be honest, we got to get to 70% for herd immunity. More on that in a minute, but let's go ahead and play the president's statement on this. Here we go.
To make every adult eligible by May.
Let me be clear. That doesn't mean everyone's going to have that shot immediately, but it means you'll be able to get in line beginning May 1.
The plan includes doubling the number of retail pharmacies and federally backed vaccination sites, as well as deploying an additional 4,000 active duty military.
They have enrolled tens of thousands of vaccine providers since the fall, and have basically turned on only a fraction of those individuals or facilities. So we have them in a stand-ready mode. So as more vaccine becomes available, they'll be turned on.
The biggest challenge, demand is currently greater than supply. Many states don't have enough professionals to administer doses. Appointments can be hard to find, and vaccine hesitancy is still an issue. But state leaders, optimistic.
We're very competitive, and we do expect, and we're able to announce today, that we expect we will be there during the by mid-April.
Multiple states already making millions more eligible. By Monday, Kentucky, Florida, Texas, California, and Georgia will all expand eligibility. And in North Carolina and Minnesota, dentists now authorized to administer COVID vaccine. Others boosting vaccination staff, also part of Biden's plan.
Okay, so there you go. So Biden's really knocked a home run here when it comes to this. We had 3 million people vaccinated last Saturday. So the production is the key right now. We got to get the production. Of course, he made that deal with Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson and Merck, bought another 100 million from them. That's 200 million from them. And now he's got the money to do it because of the American Rescue Plan. Let's see how the rest of us are doing right here in terms of the states. Let's go through. Look, the United States no longer is the worst country when it comes to the spread. We're now below Brazil. Brazil's going into their winter, though, so it's going to be a long time. Brazil is just, they didn't wear masks. They just didn't bother doing anything, and they're paying the price for it, as we did, right? Now, we've got to keep going down. We got to get this down to 3% or lower so we can actually then do contact tracing and keep everybody safe. But we're still a long ways from that. But nevertheless, we're making progress. Now, there's a little bit of a bump here. Let's hope we don't plateau like we did last summer and it goes up again. Here in Utah, we're looking at some good news. Let me refresh this just one more time because there's some good news here for Utah. Yeah, 11.55% now. So we now have our percentage of the Biden promised 100 million doses. The math's really simple. Once we hit 1 million, now all of these people have had their first dose. That means within 3 weeks, we'll have 100 million. They'll have their second dose. So this is fully vaccinated, but we're 11.55%. So we should feel really good about that. And we got to keep moving. Now, moving here in a world stage, it's still ridiculous in terms of the United States, the number of deaths versus the world. We've just done horribly. We got to do better, and we are doing better, thankfully. But let's see now how Utah's done. Utah's picked it up. Remember last week, or 2 weeks ago, we were the worst state in the whole West. We were down with Texas and down with Alabama and Georgia. We're not there anymore. We're now tied with Idaho. Yay. Okay, now we're going to use first doses here, right? Because first doses 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, you have your second dose. So first doses, 19 point, tied with Idaho. Idaho was ahead of us. Now we're caught up. Colorado is not that much further ahead. Nevada is not that much further ahead. Oregon and California. Arizona's much further ahead, 22%, 29%. New Mexico, Montana, 23%. So we were catching up. So we're doing a better job, and that's great news for all of us, for our schools. So as far as the update on that, it's just really, really exciting to see what's going on with the Johnson & Johnson, 100 million more doses. And now let's look at this right here. Let's take one more deep look at this, and let's go to this link right here.
Lester, 90% of American households should be getting expected to go out as
celebrating unprecedented cooperation between two rival CEOs a week after Merck agreed to help produce the J&J vaccine. Now the president is ordering another 100 million doses to ensure the country has enough for later this year.
A lot can change, and we need to be prepared.
Meanwhile, Pfizer and Moderna are increasing vaccine shipments to more than 20 million doses per week. While 60% of Americans 65 and older have now been vaccinated, 90% of the country has not. The good news, new cases, hospitalizations, and deaths are trending down.
We are at a critical point in this pandemic and on the cusp of having enough vaccine to protect every adult in the United States.
Also tonight, the government is relaxing restrictions on visiting nursing home residents. With more residents vaccinated and infection rates dropping, the government is encouraging responsible indoor visitation at all times and for all residents, even if there's a confirmed case of COVID, as long as there's evidence that the outbreak is contained. The big unknown tonight, how quickly could the country achieve herd immunity when 70 to 85% of the population is immune? Nearly 30 million Americans are known to have had COVID, but experts believe the real number could be 3 times higher. While it's not clear how long that immunity lasts, if you add that number to those already fully vaccinated, the total is 122 million with some degree of immunity. If another 120 million get their shots by mid-June, that would be 75% of the population within the herd immunity range.
At the rate we're currently giving vaccine, we can get there by the summer. I think what's going to tell all is what happens next winter.
It's still not clear how long immunity lasts. The hope is that vaccines provide a year or more of protection. But for those who've been sick, that immunity may last 3 months, maybe a year. Only time will tell.
In other words, what we're saying is there's a lot more science to do. And we still have to learn more about this virus, how the vaccines work. And we're all going to be looking at booster shots in the fall. For sure. Moderna's already said they're working on the booster for all the different variants. So the battle's not over. And what we need to understand too is that a lot of people have given up already. At a chance we've got to get this below 3%, they don't care. I'm down here in Washington County. They're not testing people down here. Nobody's wearing masks. It's just sad. If they go into a store, they have to, like Target or whatever. But it's just like, guys, you can still infect others until we get to herd immunity. And I don't think people understand what it means to be part of the community. So we'll see how this plays out. We may hit a plateau and have another spike because, again, people are, I don't know, use my own term here, for a little selfish, thinking that, they're okay, then they can't infect anybody else. None of us are okay till we reach herd immunity. And then we do contact tracing. That's the science. And people just, aren't willing to look at that. But that's fine. I mean, that's their choice. It's a free country. But that's the science. And the science will tell you every time what the numbers are going to do. Now, remember, this is important to remember. You ready? This was the deadliest year in American history. The deadliest year ever, period, ever. And the Americans' life expectancy rate has dropped by 1 full year. We now live 1 year or less longer as a country than we did a year ago. So we've got to take this battle and win it. And a lot of people want to quit in the fourth quarter. They want to quit, 100 yards from 10 yards from the goal line. And that's sad. But if you get your shots, then you're going to be okay. And, so I guess you can say that, you're at least safe, but we should still try to protect others. And so that's why you wear masks. And that's why I try to wear masks whenever I'm out. And I do. I don't try, I do. And just to protect others. If for nothing else, to try to set an example, right, to other people. So if I'm a teacher, I ought to set the example for my students, right? I mean, that's just bottom line stuff here. So that's what we're in. We're in a war. This is worse than a war. I mean, that's hard to say, but you look at the deadliest year in American history, you guys just lived through it. And it's going to give you a lot to think about in the future. Also, too, the other thing we should remember is that this will not be the last. This will not be the last time we have another pandemic. We need to get good at this. We need to be proficient at keeping each other safe. But again, sometimes people learn the hard way. Now let's get to the rest of it. The rest of it for your paper is very, very simple. The American Rescue Plan passed. There is so much in that law. I sent you an email when it passed that night, if you read it. I'm going to review a lot of it, what's in here right now. I'm going to show you a clip or two, and then we'll listen to the president. But here's the thing. Now that this is passed, it has so much in it, it addresses all four of your questions. All four of your questions. It is the biggest piece of legislation to take a bite out of childhood poverty that we've had since the 1960s. This tax credit for all children, 62 million children affected, including you. I mean, you're in that age group, right? You're part of a family still. It's just an immense law. Okay, so let's go through it. It happened on day 50, 51, somewhere like that. One of the most consequential legislative achievements in decades. It's bigger, they're saying, I kind of agree, than anything Obama got through, or anything Clinton got through, or anything Bush got through, anything the previous president got through. Here was the House voted 220 to 211 to accept the Senate's version of the bill. So when it passed the Senate, rather than going to conference committee, the House just passed the Senate's bill. So now both chambers have passed it. It went to the president's desk, and I'll get my image out of the way of the president here, and he signed it with Kamala Harris in the room. And remember when he was vice president and Obama was signing his major pieces of legislation, it was Biden that was tasked to make sure it got implemented right. And he was known as the sheriff because he worked really hard to make sure every dollar was spent in the right way and so on. This president right here is destined for greatness. I mean, this now seals the deal. Let's go through it. Biden was sent to his desk. Here he is signing it. The package is one of the most consequential anti-poverty bills in the modern era, with the Nonpartisan Tax Policy Center projecting that will boost the incomes of the poorest 20% of Americans by 20%. This has not happened since the 1960s. Let's keep going. The bill approves $1,400 stimulus payments for individuals making $75,000 and couples making up $150,000. Now, I'm giving you data here, data you can use in your paper. You got to use information and data, right? It'll extend the weekly $300 unemployment insurance until September 6th. So if you've lost your job, you get a supplement to your unemployment insurance, which is already there. An increased child tax credit in 2021 of $3,600 for children of ages 5 up to age 5, and $3,000 for 6 to 17. That is huge, and they might make that permanent so that every child in America gets $3,600 every year to make sure they eat well, to make sure they can get to school, to make sure that they're not living in poverty. This is a big deal. Now, $128 billion to reopen our schools, to provide the ventilation systems and all the things to upgrade our schools. It's one of the biggest expenditures to improve schools, the infrastructure, the buildings, and that kind of things themselves, to provide everything we need to keep people safe next year. $19 billion in emergency rental assistance, people who've lost their jobs, who can't pay their rent. This is a huge drag on the economy. Having this put in here means that if you're a landowner or you rent apartments, you're going to get paid, as opposed to people who can't afford to pay because they've lost their job. $25 billion to help restaurants. This was huge. Small restaurants have really struggled. And I know I've got some favorite restaurants here in town down in St. George. I love these restaurants, but I'm not able to go and dine in like I used to. So we try to support them by doing the pickup and that kind of thing. But it's just not enough. And so many of those folks have lost their jobs. Let's keep going. $46 billion for coronavirus testing and contact tracing. We need that. We need that. We got to get our infection rate below 3%. Then we can actually just isolate individual cases. Here's the next one. $5.2 billion to support research and development of vaccines. That's a lot of money to support vaccine research. In other words, let's keep these companies that have done such a great job coming up with these new vaccines. I mean, that couple from Turkey that live in Germany, BioNTech, that came up with the Pfizer vaccine. I mean, let's get their company growing and more people hired and all that kind of stuff. And of course here, Moderna, $7.25 billion paycheck protection program for loans for, basically if a company goes bankrupt, can't pay you and they owe you money as a worker. Utah could get $8 billion for infrastructure, road building, construction, that kind of thing. And these are great jobs. These are great construction jobs that come from that. Extended unemployment. If you've lost your job because of COVID, they're going to extend your unemployment insurance. Basically, every day you work, you pay into a fund called unemployment. It's kind of an insurance program. You lose your job, you get part of your salary until you can find a new one. They're extending that because we've had still 12 million completely unemployed, a lot of people underemployed. It's one of the largest spending packages in US history. It's huge. Polling shows also that it has widespread support. Between 70 and 75% of Americans approve of it. All right, now, this is kind of a little setup piece that I would normally have presented later, but I think this bill shocked me. I was like expecting there to be a big package, nice little historic thing, and set Biden's presidency up for success. I wasn't expecting this. I was expecting this to get trimmed down big time in the Senate. But what happened? You remember, let's go back to the beginning of the story. When Georgia passed the 2 senators that were Democrats and got the Democrats to 50 in that special election at the beginning of the semester, that's why this passed. Had that not happened, they wouldn't have the 50 vote margin plus the vice president you see here casting the deciding vote to pass this thing because it went along party lines. So basically, the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, and Chuck Schumer in the Senate, the leader of the Senate for the Democrats, the president was willing to kind of back off. In fact, they backed off on one thing. They backed off on the minimum wage. They gave that up. That was kind of a bone they threw to the Republicans, give them something to, cheer about. Most states are raising the minimum wage anyway, so I don't know that it's really necessary. But by the same token, they said, go big, Mr. President. When Obama was president, we should have gone bigger when we had the chance. Go big. So they went big. This is one of the most historic pieces of legislation ever, and it gives you so much to write about. The more you get into the details, and I did put another article up there for you to link to that you can put in the details, and it's all about the details. Now, you may love this bill, you may hate this bill. That's opinion, and we'll discuss that when I get back after your papers are submitted, after we get the early turn-ins anyway. Then we'll debate pluses, minuses, good, bad, all that kind of stuff. This is just reporting the research. That's all you're looking at, and I gave you a bunch to go with. All right, I'm a little surprised I gave you that much too. Basically, we're living in a second Gilded Age. What do we mean by that? Back in the latter part of the 1800s, so the 19th century, in that later part of the 1800s, we had these, what we came to know as robber barons. These were the wealthiest men in the world. They were the captains of industry. They created the oil industry like Rockefeller, the steel industry like Carnegie, the shipping industry, whatever. And a small group of what we call capitalists, right? Small group of people who, on today's terms, are billionaires who have the money to just pretty much build any business they want and do whatever they want. Now, these billionaires, right, made so much money that it created an income distribution gap like you've never seen. The Gilded Age, it was called, a society glittering with showy wealth, but corrupt at the core, because there was a lot of corruption in this, because there was a lot of money. And basically, you look at this, here's John D. Rockefeller, famous political cartoon. And this businessman is basically buying congressmen and senators. He's basically saying, I'll fund your campaign if you pass laws that I like. For example, I'm not for child, labor laws and stuff, and I do women voting. No. Basically, they controlled politics. And it was called the Gilded Age. It was an age of business where business really controlled the country. And we're not talking about, lots of small businesses. We're talking about a few very large business owners who really controlled things. They bought and sold Congress. So they got the name the robber barons from reporters, from people in the news media. Now, there was a lot of quid pro quo here, where I'll help fund your campaign if you go to Congress and pass laws that are the ones I like. The income disparity during that era was huge. It was absolutely huge. And it was just made akin to the Middle Ages, where you had the landowning barons and the peasants had to give all their wealth to the landowning class, right? Well, now we're saying we got a new class. These are the robber barons and the multi-billionaires in today's money, millionaires then. But here's all the poor and whatever just giving all their loot because they don't have a choice, because that's the way the laws are written and the way things go. One of the key, he became the richest man in the world for a time. His name was William H. Vanderbilt. And what you should know about American history is that when we built the Transcontinental Railroad, we as a people paid for that because nobody thought it was going to be profitable. Linking California to the East was not considered a profitable thing. So no business would invest in it. But Lincoln invested in it. He paid a lot of money, something like $30,000 a mile, which was huge in those days, to get that thing built. And when it did, it was an instant success. Now, then businesses got interested in the railroads. Railroads became the number one way to make money in the late 1800s. And people like Vanderbilt bought it in. He has also established a ship empire as we went to steamships in terms of transporting goods across the Atlantic and so on. Now, when asked, wait a minute, you've got all of these railroads now. And what he was doing is what we call cutthroat competition. He was basically setting up a railroad line or buying a railroad. And there would be competitor railroad lines going to different cities and around about. And he basically would cut prices so low that the other railroads went out of business. When they folded, he bought them up. He controlled half the railroads in America. Well, it'd be actually Morgan that would do that. But by the same token, he became the richest man in the world for a time. And when asked, wait a minute, shouldn't you be running your railroads for the public good? Because, by the way, as soon as you drove your competitor out of business, you then raised the prices because you had a monopoly, and the railroads are just ripping people off right and left. That goes back to this cartoon. You can see Vanderbilt. I'm sorry, everybody want to use my railroad to ship your farm goods out of Iowa. It's going to cost you an arm and a leg. If you want to get a new stove, a Franklin stove, over my railroad, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg. So here's the thing. The average person was struggling. Vanderbilt was doing great. And when they asked, shouldn't you do this for the public good? He said, the public be darned. He didn't care about that. He cared about his profits and his corporate profits, and that was it. And so this became kind of a rough time when people worked an average of 50 to 60 hours a week in factories and so on. Children as young as 7 were working in mines or working in textile factories. They never went to school because they had to work to pay the family bills. It was a time of, well, let's be honest, a real class system here. J.P. Morgan became one of the richest men in the world, too, through this cutthroat railroad competition. He also made a lot of money lending to both sides in the Franco-Prussian War in 1871. That's a lot to that story, so I'll just skip it for now. But by the time he was done, he bought up half of the American railroad track in America. He owned half the railroads. And then his friends owned the rest. So they would have these big meetings. There's a famous picture. I don't know if I have it in here. Famous picture of them sitting in Waldorf Astoria, big hotel in New York, in a table shaped like a railroad tie. And all the people that owned railroads were there, and they fixed the prices and they made them really high, so they all were really rich and profitable. Anyway, the point was, then he gets into banking. JP Morgan Chase Bank still holds his name. Rockefeller became then replaced those two as the richest man in the world. By the way, you should know that Morgan had a lot to do with the electrification of the country. General Electric was his company, but that's a different story too. John D. Rockefeller created the oil industry. Oil was discovered in Western Pennsylvania. He bought a refinery in Ohio, and so he set up this huge company which created a monopoly in oil and owned 95% of all the gasoline produced in the country. So he could call it whatever price he wanted, and he made himself the richest man in the world because of that. Andrew Carnegie did the same thing in steel. A Scottish immigrant comes in. He just created a process that was created in Germany. He brought it to America, and there's a lot to his story. He started out as just a poor kid, but rose up to basically create this massive steel empire. And the only person that could afford to buy it was J.P. Morgan and a bunch of investors. And it was 492 million in those days, which would be literally probably the same in billions today. So he became another robber baron. and he treated his employees terribly. Okay, that's one of the stories. We could go on with some of the other corruption that took place in the cities and so on in Boss Tweed, but we don't have time for that. But taking these robber barons on who were controlling politics, and oh man, I lost a couple of pictures there, darn it. Let's see if I can get those pictures back. Maybe they're on the next slide. Yeah, we'll fix it later. Okay, so let me escape out. Yeah, let's see if we can get those pictures in, because I really want those pictures in. Okay, hang on. Let's give it a second to reload. Because what we're talking about, it looks like they're not, but I'll tell you who's in the picture. So I guess that's the best we can do for now. But at any rate, in contrast to the robber barons, the small handful of rich billionaires that controlled the economy of the country and controlled their politics was a group called the progressives. Now you're going to hear a lot about it. It's a progressive agenda. It's progressive this, it's progressive that. Progressives are not socialists. They're not communists, okay? But they're different. They believe in science. They believe that science and technology can be used to make society better. They're educated, right? And progressives believe that we should basically create a society that's good for everyone and not just the few at the top. So this becomes the big counterbalance against the robber barons, okay? And so what we have here is a group that really created the life we live in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Teddy Roosevelt is famous as a progressive president. So was Wilson. So was Franklin Roosevelt. I had a picture here of LBJ, Lyndon Johnson. And now I'm putting Biden on this list because this is so much more progressive than anybody thought he was going to go. And so these are probably the top 5 great presidents in terms of the progressive era. But here's what they provided over time. All right. Women get the right to vote. The Food and Drug Administration to make sure our food's pure. These are the same people testing the vaccine to make sure it doesn't kill us, that it's safe and effective. Help for the poor, things like food stamps, that kind of thing. Labor, justice for laborers, workplace safety laws. They didn't have workplace safety laws before these guys showed up. When you hurt yourself on the job, you cut your arm off, they just fired you. Your fault for getting hurt. Bye. See you later. We'll bring somebody else in to do your job. No, we now have a thing called unemployment compensation, where you actually, if you're injured on the job, you'll be allowed to go through therapy and to recover and to be better and return to work when you can. Child labor laws. That's kind of big. You're in school because of those laws. That was the thing. Kids who are working don't go to school, but kids who go to school, learn, and become richer, essentially. I mean, you're going to do better in life. Direct election of senators was their thing. Improved communities, sewage systems, trash removal, clean water. Let's go through the list. 8-hour workday. We take it so for granted today. Somebody had to fight for that. That just didn't happen. Progressive income taxes, where if you're poor, you pay a less percentage than if you're very, very rich. You pay a higher percentage. That's what we mean by progressive income taxes. Recall elections in some states now. If you don't like your governor, you can have a recall election and end his term early. Can't do that on a national level, but on a state level, you can. Public referendums on a state level, where state people in the state actually vote for laws. We do that every election, Utah. There's 2 or 3 laws where we get to tell the legislature what we want. Minimum wage was their thing. The Federal Reserve Bank, where we have a national bank, they reestablished it in 1907. Social Security, which every old person will get because we pay into it our entire lives. Every day I work, still doing it, I pay into Social Security so that when I get to age 63, if you want to take it early, but it's lesser amount, 66, it's a bigger amount, 70, it's a bigger amount. But then you get a retirement pension when you're too old to work. It's kind of a brilliant system put in by FDR, and I don't know anybody my age that doesn't love it. Voter rights, allowing everybody the right to vote. This child tax credit fits right into 62 million kids in Biden's plan. So that's why we're throwing him in there as one of the most important new presidents of the progressive movement. Progressives really have created the comfort zone in our lives, right? But who opposes it? Well, people that want to maintain the status quo. So conservatives are not going to like this law, but most Americans are going to, 70+%, and it's going to help the poor. So the progressives are all about helping the poor and making, believing, all men are created equal in terms of the economy too, and the opportunities they get in education, whatever. And that's kind of a big deal. And President Biden now put himself into that realm. Now, income distribution is now worse today than it was back in the day. Let's go through and talk about this legislation that just got passed. So here we go. This is progressive legislation, big progressive legislation.
Tonight, the historic vote, and now the desperately needed relief on the way to millions of Americans. President Biden declaring help is here after the final vote to pass his $1.9 trillion COVID rescue plan. And those $1,400 checks coming, the fastest way to get yours. The billions for vaccine distribution, small businesses, rental assistance, childcare. President touting it as a major victory, but not a single Republican voting for it. Also, the president announcing the U.S. will buy 100 million more doses of Johnson & Johnson's single-shot vaccine, and Dr. Fauci and how long it will take for the U.S. to reach herd immunity. Texas today officially ending its mask mandate and letting businesses reopen 100%. But the new battle, the city's still requiring masks. The record surge in migrant children at the border with the president under pressure, a blunt new warning from the White House. Mudslides forcing mandatory evacuations in California and in Hawaii, a state of emergency tonight. And 1 year later, a question: what was the last photo you took before the pandemic hit?
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening. 7 weeks into his presidency, Joe Biden has scored his first legislative victory, and it's a big one, both in dollars and scope, directly impacting Americans whose economic security has been upended by the pandemic. The COVID relief bill winning final approval in the House today with its jaw-dropping price tag of nearly $2 trillion. Millions of Americans are about to see government payments of up to $1,400 land in their bank accounts. We'll tell you what else is in it and how to speed those payments along. We'll also tell you why herd immunity to COVID could be achieved sooner than expected. And later, what's the last photo on your camera before lockdown? Why it may be worth a look. But let's begin in Washington with today's massive economic shot in the arm.
Tonight, President Biden applauding his first legislative win, the passage of the country's sixth and largest COVID relief bill.
This bill represents a historic victory for the American people.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi celebrating as she gavelled in the final vote. The cornerstone of the bill, those $1,400 direct payments to millions of Americans, plus aid to small businesses, including $28 billion for restaurants. Celebrity chef Tom Colicchio helped fight for those funds. What does that $28 billion mean?
It means that restaurants will stay open. It really gives us a lifeline to get through to the other side.
Help cannot come soon enough for Kevin Liu, who owns a restaurant and bakery in Richmond, Virginia.
I think if the government had not come through with this relief, then in 6 months and a year's time, you're going to run out of money sooner or later.
Also in the bill, $7.5 billion for vaccine distribution, $22 billion for rent assistance, $39 billion for childcare. Democrats taking a victory lap.
What do we say to America? We say to America, help is on the way.
But this is the first COVID relief bill to pass without any Republican support. GOP lawmakers say too much of the $1.9 trillion bill does not go directly to COVID relief. And they note the economy is recovering as states reopen.
This is the most left-wing bill ever passed by the Congress. But beware, there's no such thing as free money.
Now, President Biden will sign that bill into law on Friday and then hit the road to tout it, making his...
Okay, so he's out to sell the bill and whatever, but it's law. It's become law. And we can debate, whether it's a good idea or not when we get back, when I get back after you've written your paper. But this timing is perfect for your paper. it just met our schedule. It's like I actually, called Biden up and said, hey, can you get this, Nancy and Chuck, can you get this bill through before they write their paper? We can open it up now. So this is Get Your Paper Written Week. Next week, you're going to have more study guides. We're going to have more work. We've got lots of things to do still, state test and whatever. But I'm giving you this week. And if you had finished that last assignment, you really do have the week to get this thing drafted. And it's going to take some proofreads. It's going to take some work. It's the biggest assignment of the year. It's the most important assignment of the year. The best grades you can get with 100% on everything else would be a C- if you don't turn this in. It's a big deal. Okay, so here it is. Paper guidance, submission guide. There it is. So you can read the guidance. This, by the way, tells you more that's in the plan. That's to help you. Here's an address that Biden gave the nation last week on this whole thing. And then here you go, submission guides. Let's go ahead and click it. It's live. Click your period. You got your 4 questions. Write them in a Google Doc so you don't lose them. Copy and paste them in when you're ready with all 4, and then hit submit. And I hope to see papers by the weekend. And again, early turn in is your chance, right? To let me help you get an A. I want every single, listen to me. Okay. Raise your hand if you want an A. Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Every student this semester can earn an A. The only thing standing in your way is a lack of effort on your part. If you get the paper turned in early, I'll help you. And you can resubmit any exercise. I had, 5 or so people over the holiday that went back and got 1 or 2 or 3 points here and there to get their grades up to 97% or higher. Now they turn in this paper, A. Some, are still about 20 who haven't caught up yet, haven't finished that last assignment, which isn't a hard one. But this is the major assignment. It's going to take a lot of thinking. It's going to take a lot of thought. You're going to have to dig into the legislation. I've given you as much help as I can. But I'm not talking about it anymore. I'm not talking about the paper from here on in. I'm done. I'm going to go on and talk about the Greeks. We're going to finish the other college lecture and the other things. And I won't be talking about the paper anymore after this. So I've given you all the help I can on the most important assignment of the year. It's all set there, ready for you to go. You can start now because you don't need to wait now that the American Recovery Plan is passed and there's 100 million shots in people's arms. Biden is on a roll. He has done more by day 50 than most presidents get done in 4 years. Now all he has to do is implement it, and he's known to be good at that. As I was saying, he was called the sheriff back in the day. All right, well, listen, I've got another thing I want to show you about income distribution. Let's see if I can find it here. I'm going to have to look it up. Let me look it up really fast on YouTube. Okay, so it's kind of a famous thing that shows the income inequality. And this is a big deal because America, this was 10 years ago and it's gotten a lot worse since. But let's take a look at why this is such a big deal. Most of the money went to the poorest Americans who will spend that money and it will stimulate the economy. They're talking 5-6% growth rate this year. The economy could just explode. Let's see what happens. We're all going to know history in a bit. But let's go ahead and play this. Here we go.
I saw recently that I can't get out of my head. A Harvard business professor and economist asked more than 5,000 Americans how they thought wealth was distributed in the United States. This is what they said they thought it was. Dividing the country into 5 rough groups of the top, bottom, and middle 3 20% groups, they asked people how they thought the wealth in this country was divided. Then he asked them what they thought was the ideal distribution. And 92%, that's at least 9 out of 10 of them, said it should be more like this. In other words, more equitable than they think it is. Now that fact is telling, admittedly, the notion that most Americans know that the system is already skewed unfairly. But what's most interesting to me is the reality compared to our perception. The ideal is as far removed from our perception of reality as the actual distribution is from what we think exists in this country. So ignore the ideal for a moment. Here's what we think it is again. And here is the actual distribution, shockingly skewed. Not only do the bottom 20% and the next 20%, the bottom 40% of Americans barely have any of the wealth. I mean, it's hard to even see them on the chart. But the top 1% has more of the country's wealth than 9 out of 10 Americans believe the entire top 20% should have. Mind-blowing. But let's look at it another way, because I find this chart kind of difficult to wrap my head around. Instead, let's reduce the 311 million Americans to just a representative 100 people. Make it simple. Here they are: teachers, coaches, firefighters, construction workers, engineers, doctors, lawyers, some investment bankers, a CEO, maybe a celebrity or two. Now let's line them up according to their wealth. Poorest people on the left, wealthiest on the right, just a steady row of folks based on their net worth. We'll color code them like we did before based on which 20% quintile they fall into. Now let's reduce the total wealth of the United States, which was roughly $54 trillion in 2009, to this symbolic pile of cash. And let's distribute it among our 100 Americans. Well, here's socialism, all the wealth of the country distributed equally. We all know that won't work. We need to encourage people to work and work hard to achieve that good old American dream and keep our country moving forward. So, here's that ideal we asked everyone about. Something like this curve. This isn't too bad. We've got some incentive, as the wealthiest folks are now about 10 to 20 times better off than the poorest Americans. But hey, even the poor folks aren't actually poor, since the poverty line has stayed almost entirely off the chart. We have a super healthy middle class with a smooth transition into wealth. And yes, Republicans and Democrats alike chose this curve. 9 out of 10 people, 92%, said this was a nice, ideal distribution of America's wealth. But let's move on. This is what people think America's wealth distribution actually looks like. Not as equitable, clearly, but for me, even this still looks pretty great. Yes, the poorest 20 to 30% are starting to suffer quite a lot compared to the ideal, and the middle class is certainly struggling more than they were, while the rich and wealthy are making roughly 100 times that of the poorest Americans and about 10 times that of the still healthy middle class. Sadly, this isn't even close to the reality. Here is the actual distribution of wealth in America. The poorest Americans don't even register. They're down to pocket change. And the middle class is barely distinguishable from the poor. In fact, even the rich between the top 10 and 20 percentile are worse off. Only the top 10% are better off. And how much better off? So much better off that the top 2 to 5% are actually off the chart at this scale. And the top 1%, this guy, well, his stack of money stretches 10 times higher than we can show. Here's his stack of cash, restacked, all by itself. This is the top 1% we've been hearing so much about. So much green in his pockets that I have to give him a whole new column of his own because he won't fit on my chart.
Okay, now I'm going to stop that and make this point. This is what makes this a progressive piece of legislation, because it's putting all this money into children on the poor end of the scale. 80% of this money goes down toward the middle class and the poor folks. You're going to know where you stand. Go home and find out if your family got a check. If you got a check, that means you're making less than basically, I think it's 170,000 is the cutoff, and you're down here. And you're getting a check, $1,400, and it will start flowing. People are already getting that money. And then there's the big tax credit, $3,600 per child. This is what we call progressive. It's not communism. It's not socialism. People will portray it that way. It's just more of a balance. So we can get back to maybe what might be a better ideal, like something more like this. And that's what this legislation does. I am shocked by it. I didn't think it would go this progressive. I didn't think it would go this far. It's a major deal. And so now you have a lot to write about. Again, write about the facts. You can express your opinion later. We'll have separate essays on all 4 columns where you can express your opinion. Save your opinion for there. Get the facts now. Remember, research is just about what happened. It's not about what we think we want to have happen. It's about what actually happened. Biden will now go down in history as one of the great progressive presidents in American history. We got to go back to Johnson in the 1960s to see anything this big. So I'm stunned, to be quite honest. And the more I learn about it, the more shocked I am. I thought it would be much more moderate, in the middle, and it wasn't. And it was because of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and the Democrats in the House and the Senate. They're the ones that passed this. Biden wanted it, a big bill, but I don't think he even thought it would get this big to begin with. All right, and then Biden's good at making sure the money goes where it's supposed to go. That's kind of what he's known for, is being the sheriff. And Kamala Harris will be involved in that too. So it's a momentous moment in American political and legislative history. It's huge. All right, with that, you can write your paper. And you're not going to hear any more about it from me until we get back and debate the specifics after your papers are finished. Hopefully everybody turns it in by April 1st. Okay? Raise your hand if you're going to get it in early. Raise your hand. Do I see hands not up? Okay? Every hand should be up. Everybody should get this in early. And then that way we can guarantee that you're going to do well. Okay? You want me to look through this. You want me to kind of give you an opinion and maybe have you rewrite one or two of them a little bit where you've fallen short in your data collection and your research. Okay? So remember, it's a research paper. Okay? Good luck. And this is it. Yeah, no more worrying about it. So you're set, ready to go. It's open today. All right, we'll see you guys. We'll talk to you soon. I'm going to go ahead and share this with the students at home. So I'll be back in